today's video, the Badinerie Analysis, we're going to be looking at section B's melody. Now, just to recap the motifs, motif is a short melodic idea, and as we know, Bach has created the melody and is based on two short melodic motifs, and both of them are very different. So we have motif X and motif Y. Now, just to recap that, if we were to be analysing motif X, we can just look at it and listen to it and see and hear that it is descending in pitch. It is getting lower, so we can see it's going from high pitch to low pitch. We'd also be able to describe it as an arpeggio or broken chord. And as we know, a broken chord or an arpeggio are the notes of a chord but played separately. So this would be described as a descending arpeggio or descending broken chord. When we're looking at motif Y, again it's very different. We can see that it's ascending. So as we move along, it's gradually getting higher in pitch. We would also be able to describe this motif as having some arpeggio movement, which I've just highlighted there. We've got two arpeggios or two broken chords. And also, we have some conjunct movement as well. So here, we have a conjunct movement, so notes moving in step. So an ascending arpeggio and ascending motif with some arpeggio and conjunct movement. So now we're going to be looking at the melody for all of section B. We are going to be focusing mainly on the flute. But as we know, Bach being a genius, he passes that motif to other instruments. So we're going to be focusing on the basso continuo. We're also going to be looking at melodic devices, which will also include the other instruments in the ensemble. So let's make a start. This section, section B, starts with an anacrusis, just like section A. So it starts with that upbeat, and that's a really important feature to note. That the melody is beginning with an anacrusis. The first motif that we come across is motif X, and as we've just analysed, it is a descending arpeggio. However, in this case, it is a descending F-sharp minor arpeggio, because we are in a new key now. So this motif, for the start of section B, motif X, is a descending F-sharp minor arpeggio. Following this is motif X1. We're calling it X1 because he's inverted it, so he's taken motif X, or he's taken aspects of motif X, but now he's started to invert it. So instead of going lower in pitch, descending, he's now going to go higher. So we'll call this motif as ascending if we were to describe it. Following this is motif X, and once again we would describe this as a descending arpeggio. Motif Y is now making a bit of a comeback, and it's motif Y modified because it does end with 4 semiquavers. If we were to describe this, of course we would be calling it ascending. It is an ascending motif, and it has arpeggio movements, which I've just highlighted there for you, so we can see we've got 2 arpeggio movements there, and also we have conjunct movements, which we can see there highlighted, or notes that are moving in step, which then creates this. Following this is motif Y1. Just like we've learnt before, he's taken aspects of motif Y, but he's now started to develop it. In this case, it's ascending, but also he's using rising intervals. If we look at the first 2 notes, we have D and F, D and G, D and A, D and B. The distance between those 2 notes is getting higher. It's rising, so we would call this rising intervals. Now, some of this motif is on the next slide, and we will see it when we go over to the next page. But what's really interesting about this motif is this is a transposed copy. So, in section A, Y1, we would find it in bars 12 beat 2 to bar 16 beat 1. What Bach has done is Bach has transposed that melody from bar 12 beat 2 to bar 16 beat 1 and placed it here. Now transposed, if we think of the word trans means to move, so we might have transform, transformation. So when we transpose something, we take a melodic idea, in this case, we take a melodic idea, and to transpose it, we keep the same shape, we keep the same intervals. It is more or less exactly the same. The only difference is it'll be different notes. So here you'll be able to see this is from section A. It's much higher. And this is section B's Y1 motif. It's much lower. It's the exact same shape, same intervals. It is exactly the same, but just different notes. And that is what transpose means. We're taking that Y1 melody from section A, which was on bars 12 beat 2 to bar 16 beat 1, and we are then just transposing it, just making it go lower, same shape, same rhythm, same intervals, but just different notes. And of course we're in a new key as well, which we will discuss in later videos. You might also remember that we've spoke about the flute rising in pitch, and I've just highlighted the notes that are going higher in pitch gradually. If we look at the basso continuo, we'll start to see that it's on the beat and it's getting lower. So we have C, B, A and G. If you remember back to section A, this melodic device that we're now talking about in this section is called contrary motion. The flute is getting higher in pitch, the basso continuo is getting lower in pitch. Let's just have a listen to what this sounds like. Now I'm going to slow it down. So you'll be able to hear the flute rising in pitch and the basso continuo going lower in pitch. So that is another little melodic device that Bach uses, and contrary motion. We've seen it before in section A, we're now seeing it in section B, but it's just lower in pitch, still contrary motion. Following this, remember the genius of Bach is he uses the motifs we've spoken about and he passes them into other instruments. We're now going to focus on the basso continuo. We can see here just by looking at it that it's motif X modified because it does end, rather than ending on a crotchet, we're ending on a quaver and two semiquavers. However, if we were to describe this, of course we would call it descending arpeggio. Following this, as we know, is motif X modified because he has changed it. Instead of using a crotchet, he's now using two quavers. However, instead of just copying it, and it's an exact copy, he has repeated it, but he's changed the notes, he's made it a bit higher. Now we would call this a sequence. So we've now got a sequence being used. As you heard there, it was much higher. If we look at the flute, we can also see the same in the flutes. We have a little motif here that the flute's playing, and then the next two bars, we also have the same rhythm, the same shape, but it's much lower. This is also a sequence. So the flute is now playing what's called a descending sequence because now this little motif has gone a bit lower. So again, we would probably say here that Bach is using a lot of sequential writing. The sequences being used in this section right here. Let's have a listen to the flute. What is quite well known with the Baroque era is using ornamentation. Ornamentation to decorate and enhance the melody. And we can start seeing that now. So Bach is now starting to use trills, and we can see trills being used in bar 27, bar 30 and 31. It's also starting to use it in violin 1 as well, so we can start seeing trills being used. Our next motif we're going to be looking at is motif X2. Now if we were to describe this, we would be describing it as descending. Of course, we can see it getting lower in pitch as we move along. However, it's using some arpeggio movement, which we can see here. So we've got this arpeggio movement, and also some conjunct movement, which we're using here. So we can start seeing arpeggio and conjunct. Bach is also now introducing a new ornament. So we're now starting to use an appoggiatura, which we can see in the flute here. Again, this is another ornament that's being used, another decoration. So here we have an appoggiatura, which is found in the flute. The next motif is motif Y modified. We're calling it Y modified because it does start with demisemiquavers. Again, if we were to describe this motif, we would be saying that it is using arpeggio and conjunct movement. Let's just have a listen. Now, as we're coming to a close, we're really getting and really learning and analysing a lot about this section. What's really interesting now is Bach is starting to introduce more ornamentation. So we're seeing the appoggiatura again, but instead of seeing it just in the flute, we've now got it in violin 1 and violin 2. So here is the appoggiatura being used. The next motif we're going to analyse is motif X1. Again, it's modified because it does end with our demisemiquavers. If we were to analyse this, just like X1 that we've analysed previously, we would be saying that this is ascending. So it's going higher in pitch. The final motif I want to bring your attention and make you aware of is in the basso continuo. And we call this motif X3. So we would describe this as descending, a descending arpeggio. However, he is altering the pitch. So if we think of motif X and it just being a descending arpeggio, now he's starting to alter the pitch of it. He starts to go lower using that arpeggio figure that we're so used to. Towards the end, he starts to ascend. So he's altering the pitch of what we have heard. Let's have a listen to it. And just to make your attention, just to make you aware, the final ornament that he's using in the flute is appoggiatura, which we can see right here. So again, he's using these ornaments and using the appoggiatura, and we now hear it in the flute in the very last bar. So, we've learnt a lot about all the motifs and we've learnt how to describe them. Let's put it into motion now. Let's see how all of this fits together. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See you soon.